Hey, what's going on everyone? Gareth here, FCP Hero. Welcome back to another DIY video. Today, we're going to be working on this 2011 BMW 135i and the lift behind me. So this car is kind of unique in the respect that it has the 7-speed DCT transmission. This part that is sitting on the table in front of me is the mechanism to put the transmission into neutral if the car is not running. So, i.e. in the case you have a dead battery or something mechanically is wrong with the car that needs to be towed and you can't start it, this mechanism allows the transmission to be put into neutral so it can be towed. This mechanism, particularly on the non-MDCT cars, which is what this is pretty cheap and is prone to break. And that's exactly what's happened on this car, so this part needs to be replaced. With that said, let's talk about some of the tools we're gonna need to do this job, and then we can go ahead and jump right into it. So some of the tools you need to do this job, you need a T10 Torx socket or Torx drive or something like this. These little mini pry bars are super useful for a lot of connectors and tight to reach spaces, 1/4-inch drive ratchets, 6-inch 1/4-inch extension, 10mm 1/4-inch drive socket, a T30 Torx socket, preferably a longer one, and then these non-paring pry tools, which are going to be really useful for removing a lot of the trim that you have to remove to get out of the way. That said, pretty simple basic hand tools, nothing major needed. And now that we've talked about the tools you'll need, let's go ahead and jump into it. All right, we're going to start underneath the car. We need to disconnect this parking release cable that's part of the mechanism. First thing we do is push it into neutral. Normally that mechanism inside the car is supposed to do that for us. However, it is broken and you'll see that shortly. We're going to go ahead and remove this retaining clip first. Just slide off like so, or shoot off, whichever. And from there, we got a T30 that kind of holds it to the side of the transmission housing. This does have some Loctite on it, so you're gonna feel some resistance. And then we'll go ahead and slide that off like so. Now that we have the cable released from the parking pawl release mechanism on the transmission, we're gonna go ahead and lower the car back down, and we're gonna do everything else from inside the car. So now we're inside the car. We need to gain access to that parking release mechanism, which is gonna be completely underneath this center console here. First thing I'm gonna do is lift our trim piece here for the shifter. This pretty much sits on top of the part that we need to replace, so we'll get this out of the way first. There's no mechanical connections to any of this here. It's literally all electronic, so it's a matter of unburying everything, basically. Of course, the little trim piece came off there. That's fine. Now we need to trace some of our connectors and stuff. So we have this ribbon cable here that we need to release. There's another connector back here. The car is yelling at me because the shifter has been disconnected. Yes. Very much aware of that. Some of these connectors are kind of awkwardly located. I'm gonna go ahead and remove our trim here. Having these non-marring pry tools is kind of critical to do this job. So otherwise it would be very easy to damage some of these trim pieces or break them. Gives us slightly better access. Got two 10mm screws that hold this forward trim piece in place. So I'm gonna remove those. We do need to remove that forward trim piece that has like the ashtray and stuff in it because that is blocking us from our third T30 screw, which holds the shifter mechanism to the top of this plate that we have to remove. One series, this is a little bit of a challenge. One of the screws is partially obscured by this forward trim piece. And unfortunately, this forward trim piece is attached to the center console in a way in which the only way that you can get it out is by removing the entire center console, which we're not going to do. I can get to the T30 at a little bit of an angle. Just be careful, otherwise you'll round it off and then you're really up the creek without a paddle. But there's 3 T30s that hold our shifter in place that we need to get out. So I'm going to work on this one in the front first and get it loose. And then I'll work on the other ones. But you can just get on it. So having like a really long one-piece T30 is useful, or if you have a T30 on a swivel, you might be able to get to it. Just gonna take my time and make sure that we get it out entirely. So the main connector for the shifter, it's got two locking tabs, one on the bottom, one on the top. You have to depress both of them in order to get the connector out. So with a little pry bar or pocket screwdriver, you can get under the release mechanism and then start to pull it out, and it'll eventually come out. But yeah, a little bit of a silly design. And so from here, you should be able to get our actual gear shifter out. The rubber gasket that's the base of the new part is kind of wrapped around it, so we have to pull it out and backwards towards us. And there's not a lot of room for this to clear, but it should clear. And we got one more connector here. I think the only thing worse than getting it out is going to be putting the new one back in. All right, this is a little bit of a wrestling match to get this to clear the hole on top of the transmission tunnel. But as you can see, the entire mechanism here, it literally bolts to the floor. This is the rubber gasket, which comes with the new part. So I'm gonna go ahead, go over to the bench. We'll swap over our shifter mechanism right here. And then once that's swapped over, we can then go ahead and fish in the new part, which is probably gonna be just as much of an adventure as getting this part out was. So we'll see how hard it is to get it back in. But so far, loosening up the console here by unbolting those two 10mm definitely helped out quite a bit. So I'm gonna remain cautiously optimistic that we can fish this back in as an installed unit. So now we're over here on the workbench. We need to separate this parking lockout mechanism from the shifter right here. It's held in with 4 10mm screws. So there's one here, one here, one here, and another one is tucked back here. I'm sorry, I lied. It's only 3 10mm screws. Now, talking about the part that's broken, it's this right here. This should be totally surrounded by plastic like this, and this screw is broken. So when you turn this in the car, it does not pull this cable whatsoever. And that's why we're replacing it. So go ahead and remove these 10mm Torx. We also have this plastic piece up front here, which slides into the base of the shifter itself. So we need to release this. This kind of like locks the cable to the housing. Not really sure how that comes apart, but we'll figure it out. This has 2 kind of plastic retaining clips that we need to push in, like so. We'll show you those in a second, but it kind of just slides out of the housing. So the part in question, let's see if we can get enough separation here. There we go. Released. So the way that this part slides into this housing, we can actually just pull this forward. This plastic piece right here slides into this notch, and there's 2 locks. There's one here, one here. Those need to be depressed. Then you could slide it back. And once that slides back, you could just remove this entire mechanism. So now we have to install this entire piece onto this new base here. And so kind of keeping in mind how the other one came apart, we need to orient all of these individual pieces correctly. And if we do that, it should go together without too much of a struggle. So we'll place it on the base like so. We'll take our T10 Torx, 1 screw here, at least get it started. I'm gonna leave it a little bit loose, just because I wanna be able to like move it around a little bit if I have to. And then what we also need to do here is slide this base, this plastic retainer, if you will, because it kind of orients the release cable. We need to slide that into the housing until it locks. Here's some kind of spring tension from it. I just heard it click, so that's done. And now that that's in place, we can sort of slide the boot back onto it, like so. And we need to lock the rubber sealing grommet around the base of the shifter console. And now that that's done, I'll go ahead and tighten down the T10 Torx. Want to make sure that the release mechanism works on this new one. So it should be in the down position by default. So we'll leave it like that, because that would have spring tension on it. See, the mechanism does work on the inside, so should be good, because that's the locked position right there. Remember when we pushed it up from underneath? This would have a bunch of spring tension on it, and once you release the button here, it lets it go. So we should be good. I'm going to leave that in, like I said, that neutral position right there. This part has this plastic with a safety lock on it. We'll pull that out. We don't need that anymore. And now we can go ahead and reinstall it in the car. So first thing we have to do is fish this release cable back through the hole on top of the transmission tunnel. This bracket is a little bit of a pain point. Now it does come with a new screw, but I don't want that screw to fall off or get snagged on anything, so I went ahead and just took it off. This has to kind of go in like that, and then we have to like rotate it so that this little bracket can clear. Once this is through, I'll call that a success. Also, the insulation around the transmission tunnel, so there's like a pad under here. This is also a problem because it definitely obscures the room that we have to work with. The other thing is I got to make sure that this cable is going down the right side of the transmission, which is why my hand is through this access hole at the moment. It is moving down the right side of the transmission, so feeling reasonably confident that we can go ahead and slide the rest of this in. And it is a very tight fit. Want to make sure the gasket is not getting pinched, because this does prevent water from getting inside the car. Also need to make sure that none of the electrical connectors are getting dragged under, like this one, for example, which we definitely need if we ever want to put this car into drive or shift it or do anything. So pull that up. SUCCESS. That's the way we spell success. Nothing broke. Did take a little bit of force, but it worked out. So it is doable. It is possible to replace this assembly without having to remove the entire center console. And that is a good thing. Other thing I just want to make sure is that this gasket is sitting correctly. So I'm just going to run my finger around the edge here and make sure that everything is sitting the way that it's supposed to. All right, so went ahead and worked the gasket into position around the carpet so that it's sitting sort of underneath. Therefore, if there are any water in the transmission tunnel, it doesn't make the carpet wet. So, and that has allowed for the assembly to sit flush against the transmission tunnel. I'm gonna go ahead and get one of these screws started. By the way, it wasn't Loctite, it's thread sealant, which makes sense, seeing as there could be water in the trans tunnel. And I also think these are self-tapping screws. So there was a lot of resistance when they were coming out. They're actually pretty hot because of that. But we're good now. Of course, we got these screws in the forward location that we need to install. At least getting the one started in the rear, that allows us to sort of align this one in the front. Should be easier to get going. It'll actually get easier as it starts moving down into the trans tunnel. So I'm gonna, this forward one that's particularly blocked, I want to get this one started, because then I know at least the other one off to the right there will be easier. This will also be the most difficult to get started just because of the angle that it has to go at due to our center console partially being in the way. So close, yet so far. So far, it seems to be threading in nice and easy. And I'm keeping my thumb on the back of the ratchet here to keep downward pressure on the head of the screw. Like, I'm not in love with the angle I have to do this at, but again, this forward console piece is secured from the back side of the center console, which is just so incredibly intelligent and smart from an engineering perspective, because, you know, you never have to remove that or anything. So you got two connections we need to make right here at the shifter, and then we have this blue connector right here that plugs into the neutral release mechanism. Basically, when that mechanism is applied, again, for towing purposes, it will light up the instrument cluster, letting you know that the car is in neutral, as if you wouldn't already know. So plug in that connector there, nice, solid, satisfying click. And then this one towards the front, which is slightly obscured for me. Go ahead and plug this in. There we go. So I got that secured. This connector right here goes to the sport button. We have these two 10mm screws right here that we released earlier to give us a little bit of flexibility on the center console. We'll reinstall the center console trim. It's a little bit of a weird juggling act to get it to clear the shifter surround, but that'll just click back in place like so. Pop our center trim in like that. Reinstall the shifter trim here. So now that we have everything reattached inside the car, everything resecured, I'm gonna go ahead and push the car back to the lift, get up on the lift. We'll reattach the cable to the parking pawl release mechanism on the outside of the transmission, and that'll be that. So go ahead and take all the tools outside the interior of the car, but we're wrapped up in here for now. So now we're under the car here. We have our cable, which fortunately, you know, we were able to guide it in the correct direction, and it has since wound up where it needed to go, but we need to get this thing hooked on the transmission, number one. So we'll slide that in like so. And then I need to orient the cable so that it's in this notch over here. Part of the challenge here is getting the cable to situate into the casing on the transmission. And then we also need to get this latched on at the same time. The rubber, there's a little O-ring or bushing inside of this. The rubber is going to face towards the transmission. And then we just need to make sure that our cable gets into the position it needs to be in, which of course it's not doing at the moment. It's doing everything but. I'll try to get it on the casing first and then see. I'll preemptively secure the clip. So now we have a new screw. Need to make sure that this piece is butted up against the bottom, like so. I'm gonna thread the new screw that came with the housing back into this little retainer. And I think I left that new one locked. So I just need to kind of push this up for starters so I can get this bolt started or the screw started into the transmission casing. The screw is tight. We have the cable on the neutral override here on the side of the transmission. I'm just going to kind of give this a push into a locked position, which actually appears to be already. So yeah, it's installed. I do need to release that from inside the car, but that's what the red button is for. I'll do that off camera, and that's it. So that's how you go about replacing the cable and mechanism that allows you to put the transmission of your DCT non-M BMW into neutral in case there were a mechanical issue. In the case of this car, that override, that 4mm Allen that's in there, the housing, it broke. I don't know really how, what, when, but if the car ever needed to be put in neutral in an emergency situation where the car was not running, would not be able to do it unless you crawled in the car and literally forced it in. So that's what that override is for. As you can see, you could do without removing the center console, although space is tight, but work with the car, and at the end of it, all works out. So with that said, if you have one of these cars with the DCT and you need to fix this, now you know how to do it. We hope you learned a lot in this video. If you have any questions or comments, leave in the comment box below. If you like this video, hit that like button, and definitely hit subscribe. We always have a lot of videos on the way. So as always, we'll see you for the next one. Thanks for watching.